everyone. It's Tommy Lee Hayes Brown with Rito Recognition. I am so excited today for today's webinar. We are going to be talking to Caira Benson. She is first and foremost my friend. We met a short time ago where she was the speaker at the conference board, and we hit it off immediately. My boss, Jennifer Lumba, myself, and the entire conference audience were floored by Caira and her presentation, many of us to the point of tears, after hearing her speak about her and her husband Eric's challenges during the aftermath of his military service. But more importantly, I was inspired. Inspired by the fact that Caira was standing before me looking so calm and collected. If I had to handle half of what she had been through, I probably would have folded a long time ago, let alone compose myself enough to speak to and inspire a room full of strangers. It made me immediately count my blessings and apologize for saying things to my wife like I had had a hard day the night before, which, you know, after hearing Caira speak made me realize that I really haven't had many bad days at all. You know, my usual complaints about my usual mishaps paled in comparison to what Caira and Eric have been through. She's always very quick to minimize her trials, and maybe that's what comes after you've gone through as much as she's gone through. You learn to count each day as a gift. You begin to become more thankful for the ordinary pleasures in life. You begin to appreciate and recognize the beauty and the seemingly, or what you used to may have thought as mundane. That's what Caira has done for me, and I'm sure that's what she's gonna do for you, if you're smart enough to listen. So without further hesitation, I wanna introduce to you my friend, Caira Benson. Hey, Caira.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. I don't recognize myself after that intro.
Well, I tried to, I mean, you have a long bio and a lot of accomplishments, but I really wanted our viewing audience to understand why we wanted you here today. We're a recognition company. And some people might say, well, why are you having this woman come and talk about, you know, her trials and tribulations of life and her joys and her pains and, you know, the military connection. But I think your story is one, no matter what your background is, it's something that we can all relate to. And if we can't relate to it, we are definitely able to draw inspiration from it. So I just really wanted to thank you for joining us with me, because you've got a very, very busy schedule. So we appreciate you carving out a little bit of time for us. And we're just going to let this interview flow. Honestly, honest Scout's honor, we have not, you know, prepared much in the way of questions, because I think Caira does best when we're talking. So many times we've talked since we've met personally, and I'm like, God, I wish I was recording this. Oh, I wish I got to say this. Everybody's got it in. I'm writing down notes because just it's her norm, ladies and gentlemen, to inspire, and she's not a victim. She's not a victim at all. So let's start at the beginning. So how did you and Eric meet?
So we were introduced, I lived in Georgia at the time. He lived out and he was stationed in Texas. We were introduced by someone who knew us both. Mm-hmm. And we talked and emailed for, goodness, probably a while, maybe 2 or 3 months. And I flew out to Texas to meet him. And it was immediately, just like we had emailed and talked, we kind of hit it off. And flew out to Texas and then found out he was getting deployed. And so it was kind of the introduction to my brother's in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
My grandfather and my uncle had also been service. So not a newbie, but it was a total difference to step into it as a wife. And so he deployed, and we were crazy enough to get married on R&R. So go ahead, ask me about the wedding, because literally he was calling me from Kuwait saying, I don't know if I'm going to make it or not.
Oh, Lord.
We landed in Atlanta probably 24 hours, maybe 36 for the wedding. So it's just, you know, as we joke, welcome to the government messing up your plans.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So that's how we met. We kicked it off, and we spent a lot of time before we deployed back and forth. One of us was either in Texas or Georgia every weekend. And then he deployed, and we kept talking. We decided to get married on his R&R. We ran away to the mountains and said, we're going. You can have, it's us and God, and you can have 10 people. So if you want to come, come. And that's what we did. And then he went back and finished up tour, and I finished up my MA, and my eldest and I, we moved to Texas, and we're there when he got back.
Nice. So he's been on tour a few times?
Twice. So he spent over 2 years in Iraq.
Okay.
So he was in OIF, or Operation Iraqi Freedom. He deployed at the very beginning in 2003, and he deployed again from 2005 to 2006. So kind of sometimes what we call the Wild West days, when they were, if you remember back then, they were throwing their armor down in the bottoms of the Humvees, and we were buying, private armor for him. He deployed with a sidearm, or what we would call a 9mm and 6 bullets. He spent 2 months at war, and that's all he had. So definitely a different experience than later. But so he was there in the very beginning and during the surge.
I guess then my next question is, so what happened? What happened with Eric and his health?
Yeah, so we don't have that typical, a lot of people think about an injury in the military and they think, oh, you got blown up, you went to Walter Reed, you got medevaced out. We don't have that typical experience. My husband did ROTC too, so ROTC, and during then there's active training. So he was doing airborne course, and he did some other active schools between 2000 and 2003. And that's where his first injury happened, is his parachute malfunctioned in 2000. So it opened but didn't stay open. It was a high winds jump, and the chute collapsed, and he woke up kind of drugged down a ravine. So it was kind of his first experience. He kept going because that's just the kind of person he is, and did his officer's course, went straight into deployment. And during deployment, he was a combat engineer, so a lot of explosives. But one of the ones that they've pulled out is 2 Land Rovers packed with explosives blew up a police station, and he was right outside. He was halfway in a 113, which is a big armored vehicle, but the officer kind of hangs out the top. And pretty much everything in front of him didn't make it. I don't know how to, we joke he was 5 seconds too late, in a good way. And so they've pulled that one out as a major experience for him because he doesn't remember so much after it. But again, back to those Wild West days, if you were walking, talking, and didn't lose a limb, you pretty much got shipped right back in. Wow. And there was no concussion screens. Nobody knew really about TBI. There weren't TBI screens or traumatic brain injury.
Thank you.
No one was looking for that, really, unless you lost a limb. And even the guys who lost limbs, I know several who they didn't get screened for traumatic brain injury. They just got screened for, the amputation. So we just didn't know as much back then. So there were a few more major blast exposures. One, he lost his hearing for 2 weeks. He came back home. I met him. We got married. I moved back out there during his deployment, and then he came back with a lot of different exposures there too, also blast exposures, but a lot of chemical exposures. So in his second tour, he helped do a lot of the rebuilding. So he was in some power plants and some other things, and it's hard to explain to someone who lives in America what it looks like over there when they walk by empty gas canisters on the floor that are not, the mustard gas and things like that. They're not the kind you want to be walking by. There's no sewage systems. You're walking through open sewage in the fields. It's really hard to explain that. And just everything that they went through we had some more concussive exposures there, but also a lot of chemical exposures. And by the time he got home, he was, by the time he got home for the first tour, he couldn't feel his legs when he ran. And he was starting to forget things, but he was still good enough to deploy again. And by the time he got home the second time, the numbness and just that forgetfulness and constant headaches had increased. And we didn't know what it was. Again, not a lot of people knew. They told us it was all kind of in his head, or they blamed it all on a hip and a back injury from that parachute landing.
Okay.
And so it really has, he was not diagnosed until 2018. And then in 2018, he was firmly diagnosed with traumatic brain injury and what they're calling toxic encephalopathic process from chemical exposure. So what that's done is it's kind of really hurt his whole operating system. A lot of, when you injure the brain at that capacity, nerve damage, headaches, not able to sleep, sleep apnea, all of that can come from that brain damage. And the brain's a really interesting thing. It tries to rebuild neurons. It tries to put things back together. But after so long, it can't keep doing that. And so what we're starting to see is things that are more central being impacted, like gut and heart rate and blood pressure. And so we keep moving on. But he's now...
So is this injury, tell me what it is again? Is it
traumatic brain injury? So... And
then you mentioned something else.
So yeah, toxic encephalopathic process.
Okay.
Some people also call it what they call acquired brain injury. So it's a chemical brain injury.
Okay. All right. And then, so how does that manifest itself? Is it something that just, one day he woke up and he was like this? Is something gradual? Will he heal from it? What's the diagnosis?
So with the traditional TBI, that concussion, there's a process that, yes, the brain can actually help itself. And you kind of know what you have after it. So a lot of that numbness in the legs and all that he was feeling back then, that was kind of that initial phase. What they're telling me is about 10 years out, we have a lot of people that either plateau or sink, and they're not sure why they sink, they just step down. When we figured out that there was this chemical issue, or the TEP on top of it, that makes a lot more sense. That is much more of what they call a neurodegeneration. So it's not a simple, there it goes and we're done. This is something that they don't know how to stop. They don't know that they can stop, and they just tell us to, it's going to get worse. We can do some things to slow it down, but that's about it. So
it's going to get worse. What does that mean?
Yeah. So right now, well, let me put this in perspective. When he couldn't, he had qualifiers because he couldn't do all the physical stuff anymore after he got hurt. 2 years ago, he went into a wheelchair about 95% of the time. Because
slowly but surely the nerves or what have you have started failing, and then so eventually he can't walk as long as he could have.
Right. So what we call small fibers, so those all those superficial nerves, those kind of go first. It's starting to impact his coordination and large fibers. So he'll tell his leg to move and it won't move. He'll tell his arms to close, or his arms to move or his hands to close, and that won't happen all the time now. And
so you say he tells them to, where you and I just kind of go through life and we pick up things, or we walk, or we move, but Eric has to consciously make an effort. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. To pick up that piece of paper or to walk over there. And you're saying now he's even lost the ability to do that.
Right. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's not a lot of, if I can equate it to something on the civilian side, CTE in NFL players, which has gotten a lot of exposure. Where the brain cells eventually start to die off. That's kind of, when you talk about where it's going, that's kind of where we're headed.
Okay.
But so he can't walk. he has syncope now too, so smells or any lights, anything that overloads the system will make him pass out because his brain can't handle overstimulation. He's losing the ability to process sounds. So it's interesting because it's not that traditional TBI where you get hit and then you plateau. It's this something behind it, and they're still looking for like possible MS. They're still looking for some other possible neurodegeneration. But right now, what we know is this is what we have, and we keep going. So you enjoy the days you have, and we don't think too much about where it's going.
Okay.
So, but you do get told the speech of if there's something you want to do, go do it now.
Right, because you've even seen it in the time you've been dealing, with him. I mean, since the injury, you've just seen the constant degeneration. I'm assuming. So,
oh yeah.
But yeah. So, if you guys want to contact Caira, all you have to do is, there we go. All you have to do is send your letters or your cards or whatever you want to send. There's the address, and I'm going to collect all this stuff on behalf of Caira. And if you want to email Caira, just go ahead and email me at tommylee@rideau.com, and I'll be sure your message gets through to Caira. Thank you so much again. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, for inspiring us once again. And we'll be in touch. I don't think this will be the last webinar we do together. I had a great time. I know our audience is going to find value in this, especially in these challenging times we're in. It kind of feels like we're pressing the reset button on the world, kind of, and making us all kind of appreciate and take notice and value and recognize the things that are really important and the people that are important to us. So anything else, Caira, you want to share with the audience before we say goodbye?
Thanks for having me.
Really. Not a problem. Thank you, sister. We appreciate you, and we'll be in touch.
All right.
Take care.
You too.